I'm Barry Rushton and welcome to Speak Up, the television arm of Freemasonry in New Zealand. We have a great show for you tonight. Our special guest this evening will be David Weatherly, a fine New Zealand actor. I'll also be talking to Myron Cooper, an ex-mayor of Howick, and we'll close out the show with Graham Houston, who will give us another example of Freemasons from history. My special guest this evening is David Weatherly. David, it is an absolute pleasure to have you here this evening.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, you're a wonderful guy. To most people out there, they know David's face. David was a wonderful actor, and the one that a lot of people
What do you mean
really...
was?
Oh, I'm sorry, is. I take that back. With Lord of the Rings, we saw you in Lord of the Rings. I'll come back to that a bit later. Mm-hmm. But you and I have been friends for a while.
Oh yeah.
And I know when I drive in the car, I hear that great voiceover from you, the one that's current at the moment called Mammoth.
Yes.
Oh, it is a great...
Make it mammoth.
I just love it. You see, the funny part about you, you were born in England, right? And about at age 16, you went to Canada.
Yeah.
That's right. That's what
17.
17.
I just turned 17.
I take that back. And there you joined the army.
That's right.
And so you're in the Canadian Army.
Yeah.
That's
military
incredible.
police.
Military. Ah, I see. Mm. How did you talk your way into that?
Well, 17 years old, riding motorbikes, being a policeman, shooting machine guns.
Was fun.
Was fun. What more could a bloke ask for?
I'm with you.
Yeah.
But then, in the early 60s, 61, I think, you came to New Zealand, right?
Yeah.
So what dragged you away from a lifestyle of fast racing bikes and machine guns?
Well, it was actually to continue that.
Ah.
My commanding officer in Vancouver offered me a commission to become an officer. I was only a sergeant. And when we applied, I couldn't go to the academy back east, and I couldn't go to university because I was too old at 22. So made inquiries. All I could become was a short service officer, which meant I would never go beyond the rank of captain. So made inquiries, and if I joined the New Zealand Army, they'd take me on and send me off to military academy or university, which of my choice.
And
so I came here.
What happened? Did you decide that you wouldn't do it, or?
I came here. I brought a motorbike with me.
Of course.
One of the things I wanted to do, and within 7 days I ended up in Middlemore Hospital, smashed to pieces.
Boom.
Boom, boom.
Wow. And so, what happened then? Tell me more.
Oh, well, my life up till then was skin diving, weightlifting, riding motorbikes, shooting guns, all these terribly physical things.
Chatting girls, sure. Chatting girls, chatting up girls.
Naturally. But then I was up on walking sticks, and I sort of regarded myself as a piece of junk. That was my life all over. And I sort of stayed at home. I finally managed to get a job with the Department of Internal Affairs. I went to the Department of Labour, as it was called in those days, and there was this lovely lady, Miss Worsp, and she said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I want a job." "Well, there's plenty of jobs." "Yes, but they won't hire me because I'm on walking sticks." "Oh. Well, would you consider working for the public service?" "I beg your pardon?" "Would you consider working for the public service?" I said, "What? Would you consider working for the public service?" I said, "I just want a job." So next thing I found myself as war graves officer or gaming officer for the Department of Internal Affairs.
Wow.
I stuck that for a couple of years. I had to have some more surgery on my leg. Then I went to a firm of stockbrokers, and at that stage my mother was mixed up in amateur theatre in Mount Eden, and one night she said to me, "Oh David, I'm off to a play reading, why don't you come with me, get you out of the house?" So I went along and we sat around, and I looking morose at everybody. I didn't know anybody, I didn't want to know anybody. And somebody said, "Oh, Jack hasn't turned up." "Oh, never mind. You'll read, won't you, David?"
No. And that's
all jacked up. It was already jacked up, you know.
Your mother, right?
My mum.
Did your mother fess up to it at some stage, or she?
Well, I
just
sort of rather gathered. I rather gathered.
So then, did you say, "Wow, I kind of like this"?
No, they said, "Oh, well, why don't you do the part?"
Wow.
And I said, oh, well, how do I do it on walking sticks? They said, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And of course I threw the walking sticks away. I was perfectly all right, I could walk. And they gave me that job, Willard the Marshal in the Crucible, Arthur Miller's Crucible, and also to understudy the lead, Proctor, because Proctor was, at that stage, Dave Andrews, who was a reporter with the Star, or yes, it was the New Zealand Star, Auckland Star, and he quite often was off at court and couldn't attend the rehearsals. So I had to understudy him.
Incredible.
So I had to learn Proctor, which is the lead, plus play my own part, and I got the bug. I got the bug.
You see, there's something, you know, we hear stories about people who have natural talent, not necessarily in acting, it could be in sports or something like that, and those people would never necessarily blow their own trumpet like perhaps you wouldn't yourself, but you must have had this absolute natural ability to take on a character, to be entertaining, to actually be confident.
I think it stems from something less than confidence. Was it Tony Hopkins? I read his biography, and he said, a little Welsh man, you know, a little wee chap, and he was always tormented at school. Well, I was very tiny at school. I mean, I was born just before the Blitz. We were bombed out in 1940 in the Blitz in London. And very little food, very little nutrition of any sort. And so I was very, very stunted, very tiny. And I was bullied at school. And the only way to get out of it was to make a fool of yourself. I actually rolled down stone steps to make people laugh. Things like that, absolutely ridiculous. Tony Hopkins said he had his head stuffed down the toilet and then the toilet flushed. That sort of thing. And that's how he started. Wow. You know, anything to defend yourself from being bullied. Wow. And that's it. And then of course, we were brought up without television. There was no television? What's that? We were brought up on radio. Yeah. So there were all these wonderful programs.
And the Goons.
The Goons. Beautiful.
Fabulous.
And I used to imitate the voices.
And you had a great career in, I still have a great career, I'm sure, in theatre. Right?
Yeah.
A lot of work with the Mercury Theatre in Auckland, Wellington Theatre.
My first actual stage performance, professional stage performance, was there. I'd done a drama school, Nola Miller's drama school in Wellington, in Palmerston North, Lincoln.
Wow.
And I got a telegram from Dick Campion, Jane Campion's dad, would I come to Wellington and do Oh, What a Lovely War? So I went down there for that, and that was it. It just went from there.
Which is fantastic.
Shows at Downstage, then toured with the Royal Shakespeare Company, Comedy Veras, toured with Oh, What a Lovely War, we did it again. Then I got a telegram from Auckland, Mary Amor, who used to run Central Theatre in Remuera, would I come back to Auckland and play Henry V for them, because they couldn't find an actor in Auckland to play Henry V. So I shifted back up to Auckland on the 10th of July this year, DC Day, Decimal Currency Day.
Wow. You know, there's an old saying that nothing ever is what it appears to be. You know, there's a great saying. And so the Lord of the Rings that you did in 2001, you were Barliman Butterbur, I think it was,
right,
and he was the keeper of the inn.
That's right.
The prancing pony, I think
That's
it was,
it,
right?
That's the one.
So I mean, was there, I mean, to be involved with that, to be there, I mean, to every person who's not involved would give their hinds teeth to be on screen, in the background. But there's a lot of sitting around, but it must have been fun though, right? Was it?
It was,
Must have been fun.
Yeah, it's like the whole acting thing. The rehearsals are a bore.
Yeah.
You learn. It's like masonry. The practice nights are a bore. You go through the ritual, you learn, that sort of thing. But it's the performance that you aim for
at the time.
And that was the great thing, was aiming for the performance.
Now, David, I know that you've not long been a Freemason. I think it was 93, and I mean I was from 96. But you've been through. But you have.
You were my candidate.
That's quite so. I remember you coming to my house and saying, and that's when I was interested. I mean, like a lot of people, they just had an interest and they wanted to do. And you said, well, let's follow it up. Yeah. But the thing that that I have not done, which you have, is that there are a number of different other orders in Freemasonry that people can join, which is fine. And I know you've had a great deal of enjoyment out of the Knight Templars aspect of it.
Yes, very definitely.
Tell us a little bit about that. I know you're allowed to talk about it, so tell us a little bit about what attracts you to the Knight Templars more so than just basic Freemasonry.
I think one of the main things that's made me an actor, made me a soldier, was getting dressed up in a costume and spouting lines. Now, with the Knights Templar, we don't wear just suits and things like that. We wear the full gear with swords and all sorts of things.
Big red cross.
Oh yeah, big red cross on it and everything. The thing that attracted me was the history. When I joined Freemasonry, that was the main thing that interested me, was the history and the background of it all. And at one stage I got really hooked on the connection between Freemasonry and the Knights Templar. It all came about because there was a series of books. Now, they're pretty controversial in Masonic circles as to how much fact they have. But it seems to me, reading these books, that there is a very strong connection between the Knights Templar and Freemasonry.
And interestingly enough, they were the guards for the Pope.
They were,
for the Roman Catholic.
they were his special soldiers.
That's right.
Yeah. It was started around 10th century, and a very small group of 9 knights, French knights, decided that they were going to the Holy Land to protect the king of Jerusalem, the Christian king. Now, the stories that they found something there of great value to the Christian religion, brought it back to the Pope, and the Pope was very excited by it and sponsored it, and it became huge, this army. But they were eventually overthrown by Saladin and the Muslims, and retreated in stages back to France. Then they fell foul of the King of France because he owed them so much money.
That's right.
So he had them, by nefarious means, excommunicated. And the idea was that on Friday the 13th they were all supposed to be arrested, but most of them escaped. La Rochelle was their port, and they fled up through up the west coast of Europe, up through Ireland, and they ended up in Scotland. The Templars then became fairly strong in Scotland. The Pope and the King of France were raving to get them back so they could crucify them or do something nasty to them. But Edward, the King of England, said, no, you can't. We're not allowed anybody to be tortured. We're not sending anybody back there to be used by the Inquisition for their amusement. So they became a sort of a subculture, and they went underground. Now, when they were strong in France, they financed all the great cathedrals of Chartres and places like that. Now, they provided the money, but who built them? Stonemasons.
Yeah, Freemasons.
And there's a thing with stonemasons that when you finish one job, you're given enough money to get to the next job. And it's an underground network. And the secret signs and things like that, because they were illiterate, how can you tell if you're a grade 3 stonemason? You have a shake hands in a funny way and you say a word. Now these are the much vaunted secrets of Freemasonry. The evil plot to overtake the world. You know, it's utterly ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. Yeah.
They're just simply means of identification.
That's right.
The theory is that the Knights Templar went underground with the stonemasons in England, amalgamated with them, and from that grew Freemasonry as we know it.
David, it has been Mammoth. How's it again?
Mammoth.
Mammoth.
Maybe.
Thank you for being a guest tonight. It's been absolutely fabulous, mate.
It's been my
Look
pleasure.
forward to seeing you again soon. My second guest this evening is Moran Cooper. Hello, Moran. Nice to see you, mate.
Nice to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
And thank you for taking the time for coming this evening. Now, in the eastern suburbs of Auckland, you are absolutely very well known. Now, I know possibly around in Hamilton and somewhere else, Morrinsville, you're well known. I know that too. But you were mayor of Howick, the district of Howick, for about 15 years.
Correct.
That's right.
Correct.
And what a great little area that is.
Great community, great place to work for and work with, and the people were great to work with.
I remember possibly those early days, because my family grew up in Auckland too, and those days we have changed a lot now. This whole area is just exponentially growing out. So you would have seen some incredible changes in the time that you've been there.
Well, particularly the population, its expansion, but likewise the changes in the ethnic content of it all. And I can remember in the days when I first went to Howick, there weren't any restaurants in the main street. Wow. Now there's quite a number of restaurants, but they are multicultural, which has brought quite a good change to the area.
I agree. You see, that's the thing that's happening, is change all over. Now, also too, you've been involved with Freemasonry now, and I want to say this quickly and I'll get back out of it, 60 years, right? So you obviously joined very young, is that correct?
Yes, my father and I joined at the same time, did our 3 degrees together. Yes.
Wow, that is tremendous. 60 years is absolutely superb. But there's something about the Freemason aspect that I know that ties you into something like Howick, because there are parts of Freemasonry where the communal spirit within the lodge does spill out to the community. That's for sure.
Yes, I have noticed that, and I don't think it necessarily just does that in smaller communities either. It can do it in larger ones, and having been overseas to a number of places, I've seen profound influences that Freemasons lodges have had on communities, both large and small.
Exactly. There seems to be, obviously, even within the Freemason arena, to amalgamate, to make lodges a bit smaller and join with other smaller lodges to try and make a bigger one. I mean, the same sort of thing that happens in cities. I mean, Auckland's a classic example. I'm not a great fan of amalgamation. It never seems to work in the Freemasons arena, and I'm a bit sceptical that it actually works in a city arena too. I mean, you'd have comment on that, I'm sure.
Well, the only comment I would make is that amalgamation's never entered my vocabulary, to be perfectly honest, because I abhor amalgamations of any sort. They take away the identity of a lot of the organisations that are pulled together for whatever political reason that might be. But they don't work. They don't work here at the present time in Auckland City. There are books written about it, and I must commend the Australians. They found a new word called de-amalgamation, and they're pulling Queensland to bits. They're pulling other centres around Australia to bits, because they don't work over there either.
Tell us about the early times in Howick when you arrived. And first of all, I know that you joined the council. You know, that someone said to you, Warren, why don't you stand for council? And I think a few people whispered in your ear and said, you'd be a good councillor. And sure enough, you were.
No, that's not true at all.
True.
Oh, no. The president of the Businessmen's Association, I said to him, I would like to join something in the community where I can, and it was at the end of my year in office as the past master of the Pakuranga Lodge. And I said, I would like to do something in the community. And he said, well, there's an election coming up. Why don't you stand for the council? Bob Williamson said, you won't get on. You haven't got a show getting on. But why don't you stand? It'd be good experience for you. Well, he was wrong in 2 counts. I did stand, and I did get on. Then I couldn't get off.
Obviously, in that time that you were mayor, there was lots of things done, lots of benevolent works were done, lots of activities happened. They even named a park after you, which is kind of nice, isn't it? Moran Cooper Park?
Absolute and total surprise. I was extremely grateful in a very humble way, because those nice, tranquil little parks have some significance, and that each and every mayor, coincidentally, I'm sure, has a little acreage somewhere named after them.
Great.
The likes of Sir William Stevenson, who I might remark was a very good Freemason, and I took him to the night that he received his 50-year jewel. Beautiful. So I can vouch the fact that he was a Freemason. Some people have wanted to deny that, but he was.
There's another thing that's a stalwart around in New Zealand too, is that there's a number of clubs that identify within in a town, and I believe the Howick Club, of which you are a life member, and I happen to just sort of see it on the website and do a virtual tour. What a great facility for the people of Howick and that district. It just looks like it's a great family-orientated place where people can go.
Well, very quickly I can just tell you how it arrived, where it did arrive. The Liquor Licensing Commission came to the area and said, oh, there's room for another 23 liquor licences here. And we said, well, we don't want 23 liquor licences. We don't want any more liquor licences really, except to change the type of licence. There was only a couple of pubs and there was about 2 or 3 licensed restaurants. That was about all. And we said, what about a chartered club? Now, effectively, as you probably know, chartered clubs are owned by their members, really, and they're self-policing. So we said we would like a chartered club. So we obtained a licence, bought some land at a very cheap price 33 years ago, and off we went. Today it's a roaring success, and everything's paid for, and it's got land and buildings worth over 20 million.
It's a fantastic looking place. The 60 years that you've been in Freemasonry, if you could sort of sit down and say, I'm glad I joined Freemasonry because, I mean, what's the one overriding umbrella feeling that you think that, I mean, that you just attribute to your life in Freemasonry?
Oh, commitment.
Right.
Commitment. Constant perseverance will overcome all difficulties. You've just got to keep at it. The dripping of the water on the stone.
It's the words as well too, and the actual parts of the ritual which really have great impact and great meaning when you hear them again and again. You just bathe in how beautiful they are.
Well, I found an article just the other day, which I happened to know
take a shot
where
at
it had been because I've pulled this out many times. It was produced by the New Zealand Herald on the 30th of September 2004 and written by Garth George.
Yeah.
And the caption was, of Freemasonry and a lifelong love affair with words. Now, Garth George was not a Freemason, his father was.
Yeah.
And his father used to walk around the house reciting the ritual that he had to learn for his lodge. And the son heard those words and actually admired what the language was that Freemasons spoke to each other. And I emphasise it wasn't bad language either, it was good language.
Fantastic language.
And it was educational language. And it's still used today. It's been used since, as you probably know, the 16th century.
Yeah, superb.
And there's not enough of it.
I agree. Warren, it's been great having you, my friend. Thank you very much for taking the time out and coming this evening.
Thank
Look
you.
forward to seeing you again. I'd love to talk to you about another story on wooden boat building, but we'll talk about that our next time. Okay?
It's been an inspiration to be here, and thank you very much for having me.
It's been great having you. Thank you again. We come to that part of the program now where I introduce our regular contributor, Graham Houston. Hello, Graham.
Hello, Barry.
I believe you've got someone really special you want to talk about tonight.
Sure have.
Tell us who you've picked.
Well, I picked Richard Seddon, Dick
Great.
Seddon, the longest-serving Prime Minister or Premier
King
in
Dick,
New
right?
Zealand. King Dick. Yes, he was around 1893 to 1906, and his leadership ceased when he died in 1906. But a little bit of background about King Dick. He was born in England, like a lot of our very early pioneers were, and just outside of St Helens. And he was a guy that preferred the outdoors, preferred playing games.
He was a big bloke too, wasn't he?
He was a big guy. He was unruly. He was an unpromising student. So it resulted in him leaving school at 12. And after probably a bit of a checkered working early life, he managed to put in a 5-year apprenticeship. He set sail for Australia, and he went out on paid his own passage to go to Australia, and ended up working for the government railways workshops in Williamstown. And he did that for a while, and then decided to try his hand at gold prospecting in the Bendigo goldfields.
So how did he get into politics? Is that where he went then?
Well, he got into politics. It appears he could have been a little bit of an agitator in his early in life, but when he was in Hokitika, he became involved in local politics.
Right.
He was great on the interests of miners and mining industry as a whole.
He was a bit of a bully, wasn't he?
He was a bit of a bully, and he was known, particularly on the West Coast there, as a guy that you could go to. He would sort matters out, and some reports say often with his fists.
He became a very successful Prime Minister from New Zealand.
He became...
when I say success, talking about being re-elected. Nobody's ever done it like he has.
No.
But he did join a lodge, didn't he? He joined the lodge of, I think it was
Hokitika.
Hokitika,
yes.
And he was also Grand Master of New Zealand.
Grand Master.
For 2 years.
30 years after he became a Freemason, he became Grand Master
Yep.
of the Freemasons in New Zealand. And there are numerous photos around of him proudly wearing his full regalia.
Quite so.
And he seemed to do this on whenever the occasion allowed. And there's a couple of interesting stories about Dick Seddon that are very relevant today. And I believe that it was Dick Seddon's sister, Phoebe, married a Bill Cunliffe, a William Cunliffe.
Cunliffe, wow.
They had a son, also called Bill, who had a son called David, who became a Labour Party MP in
Wow.
New Zealand, which made Dick Seddon the great-great-uncle of David Cunliffe. And the other interesting story concerns one of his cabinet ministers, a guy called Sir Alfred Cadman.
This is a great story.
Yeah,
I like
and
it.
Sir Alfred Cadman was the great-great-grandfather of our current Grand Treasurer.
A friend
who
of
is-
you and me,
Yes, who is Mike Cadman.
Mike Cadman. Lovely bloke.
Now, when Sir Alfred Cadman died, they had a service in Auckland. And I think if you go back to the archives of the old Auckland Star, you'll find on the front page photos and a record of this particular service. Dick Seddon was very much to the forefront on this. In fact, after they had completed formalities in Auckland, they took the body of Sir Alfred Cadman, Dick Seddon and the mourners down onto a barge in Auckland and sailed it across to Coromandel. And there is a photo that used to hang in the lodge rooms of Coromandel, now in the Coromandel Museum, of Dick Seddon in full Masonic regalia, Grand Master regalia, leading all the Masons in regalia, escorting the body up the main street of Coromandel.
Well, a great choice, Graham. Time's up, mate. Thank you very much. What a wonderful choice. Thank you. Well, that's our show for this week. Thank you for tuning in. If you'd like to know a bit more about Freemasonry, please feel free to go to Freemasons New Zealand, that's freemasonsnz.org, or call the telephone number. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next week.